All right, we'll call to order this City Council special meeting for Monday, October the 25th, 2021 at 5 o'clock p.m. I don't know why we have invocation and pledge for a workshop, but can we skip that?
Yeah, we typically would just do that at the 6:30, sir.
Do that at the 6:30 meeting, right? Not that we don't need all the prayer we can, but moving on, roll call and certification of quorum. All members of the council are present with the exception of Mayor Pro Tem Adrian Hernandez. He will be absent the remainder of the evening. And then moving further, we're into citizens' comments, and we have one, Mr. Lee Bloomer, there we go. I knew I was going to get it wrong. I just had to take a guess. If you'd go to the podium, give us your name and address. I believe there'll be 3 minutes up on the screen for you to see, and welcome tonight.
Hi, my name is Lee Bloomer. Actually, I would ask 4.5 minutes of your time this evening. I do have another member of my party here. I'd like to call a group to try to fit in the 5 minutes, if that's okay.
All right, that's good. Okay, yeah.
Good evening. I'm here in reference to CIP project FA 2502. In an effort to conserve time and cover all points, I'm going to read these 2 pages verbatim pretty quickly. Brief introduction. My name is Lee Bloomer. I work for Missouri Drainage District number 4 in Pearland. I've been with the Drainage District for more than 18 years. I may be familiar to some here tonight. I was born and raised in Pearland, 3rd generation. I graduated from Pearland High School. I currently live on County Road 100A, just outside of the Pearland city limits. I'm here this evening to ask council to reconsider the proposed gun range and driver training facility, CIP project FA 2502. The designated location for this facility is in the middle of an existing rural residential neighborhood. The site is adjacent to 20 homes and a church. My home, like many others, is less than 100 feet from where the city has proposed to construct a gun range with 15 shooting lanes for rifles, pistols, and shotguns, as well as a speed track for high-speed maneuvers. The incessant blasting of rifles, pistols, and shotguns firing on not one, but 15 firing lanes is maddening. How would you or your neighbors like this in your backyard? Guns blasting all hours of the day and into the night. Let's add in a speed track to practice high-speed police chase maneuvers for good measure. The obnoxiously loud noise generated by these activities will severely affect the quality of life for all residents in this quiet neighborhood. It will also further devalue our homes and property. During the recent city council meeting held on September the 20th, a city representative stated the primary justification for this project was convenience. He referenced officers have to drive to the gun range in Lake Jackson 3 to 4 times a year. Just for reference, the officers' range in Lake Jackson is less than an hour away. I would also like to point out that that facility in Lake Jackson is more than a mile from a residential home. According to the city CIP, the cost to construct this facility will be $17.3 million. $17.3 million is a significant amount of money to be spent for convenience. I am curious to the following 2 points. 1, how much of the $17.3 million, if any, is currently allocated for sound walls or another type of protective measure protecting the neighboring homes from the maddening noise? Sound walls are currently used in residential areas when speed limits exceed 40 miles an hour. How does a gun range and speed track rate? 2nd, how much of the $17.3 million, if any, is currently allocated to cleaning up the radioactive and toxic waste that is currently contaminating 5 acres of this site? Some of you may be aware of the fact that this is an old landfill, but how many here tonight are aware that this site is listed with the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission as a radioactive waste site? In 2001, after the U.S. EPA did an assessment of the site and requested that TCEQ sent letters to the city of Pearland and Brazoria County requiring cleanup of this site by September 2002. Today, on site, there remain 12 monitoring wells, 6 groundwater and 6 dry wells. Samples taken confirm americium-241 and benzene in the groundwater. For those unfamiliar with americium, it is an extremely toxic and radioactive chemical. Another radioactive material, cesium-137, is also present at the surface and below ground. It has been 20 years since the EPA notified the city to clean the site up, and nothing has been done. $17.3 million. I ask, how much is allocated to remediation? Where I come from, neighbors are considerate and look out for each other's well-being. I did mention I'm from Pearland. I would like to believe that this is still true. I'm appealing to this council to be a good neighbor. Please do not approve a facility that will pollute my neighborhood with incessant, maddening blasts of gunfire, tires squealing, and engines racing. Instead, reallocate these much-needed funds to improve drainage within the city of Pearland. The current 5-year CIP for drainage is $11.3 million. The funds proposed for this convenience alone could fund your next 5 years of drainage CIP projects and still have $6 million left over to clean this environmental catastrophe up that has been ignored for 20 years. $17.3 million can go a long ways. Please spend it on necessity, not convenience. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on into our agenda, new business. New business item number 1 is stormwater utility fee update. With that, we'll move to staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Thank you for extra time. This is a piece of prior CIP update that we did not get to that evening, and so we held it over for tonight. And with that, I'll turn over to Mr. Upton for a background introduction and comments before we get back to you, Council.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for a few minutes of your time today. As Mr. Pearson stated, this is a continuation from our previous meeting where we talked about facilities and drainage, continuing to tie onto that. So with that, we'll dive into the stormwater utility fee, but what I'll do is provide a little bit of background. As we always talk in our presentations, is planning with a purpose. We'll do a quick review of our drainage overview and then dive right into the stormwater utility fee presentation portion. So as with anything, we take a look at our strategic priorities, how these plans, in this particular case, the drainage master plan and the stormwater utility fee will then augment, go through, and then take a look at how each of these plans fit into the city's purpose. One of the other items is that this is part in a continuing series that we'll be doing quarterly with the dates provided, dealing with our CIP workshop, and then back into CIP updates as we go along throughout the remaining of fiscal year 2022. So to begin with, let's talk a little bit about the drainage overview from our previous meeting. We talked about goals and challenges and also our partnerships. What I have here are some of our drainage goals that we've had and we previously presented, but took the time to highlight that of these items that also the stormwater drainage utility fee would also spread across these and help augment and would touch each of these as well. Updating our drainage master plan, updating information into our CIP models, taking a look at long-term O&M costs. So each of that with the stormwater utility fee also touches our same general drainage goals. We also mentioned about drainage challenges, those areas that were built prior to modern drainage standards, pre-firm map areas, also prior to our engineering design criteria manual. Dealing with growth as our system is aging, increases our maintenance costs. And again, the existing funding levels in our general fund are inadequate to maintain our system as it is today. So again, the plan of the stormwater utility fee has fingers that touches each of these items that we've highlighted. Some of the things to consider as well as in our challenges is difficult meeting grant funding criteria due to cost-benefit analysis, our low to moderate income criteria that is always presented with some of these grant funds. We have limited availability of detention areas in our right-of-ways and right-of-ways themselves. And one of the items that we're hearing about now is bridges. Existing bridges are needing to be rebuilt, raised up. So those existing infrastructure provide challenges. Also, as we mentioned prior, is that we live in a flat area, and so therefore we have shallow channels, shallow detention areas that need to be widened to handle the volume of water because we are shallow. We mentioned last time talking about all of our partners. This is just a list of what they do. This is just an exact a repeat of what we talked about previously, but our partners throughout the entire drainage system. And that leads into this map. We presented this map previously. This is a very good overview of the system network from enclosed pipe system that the city maintains, how we partner through with MUDs, with municipal management districts, with private systems, how they all work together for the drainage system network. This is a complex entity, and I say that is that it works together, and also then those partnerships help maintain and operate what we have today. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and start getting into the stormwater utility fee portion of the presentation after providing the brief background on our previous presentation with drainage. We'll be talking about our purpose, our drainage infrastructure, maintenance challenges, desired outcomes, some of our ballot language that has been adopted in the previous resolution that was passed, a pro forma, and then next steps moving forward. So with that, to give some of the background, is that the purpose of the fee is to provide a dedicated, identifiable revenue and expenditure mechanism to cover the city's maintenance and operation expenses and to build small capital projects. The goal, of course, of a floodplain and stormwater management program is to improve and maintain our drainage facilities. We continually receive, and we'll capitalize and talk about this more, but we'll continually receive unfunded mandates regarding stormwater. As you may be aware, is that we've increased above 100,000 in population since our last census. That puts us into triggers of our next update to our MS4 permit require additional monitoring. These are all unfunded mandates that need to be addressed. The maintenance requirements, needs, costs are continually increasing. The drainage system's only getting bigger. As you can tell, we've expanded tremendously over the past 20 years. And also recent storm events have shown the need for this increased maintenance, this increased capacity, both for new and existing infrastructure. We need to maintain the new that's going in as well as the existing that we have. It creates the ability to address localized drainage concerns in a more responsive time. Currently, if they're a capital funded project, we go to voter approved bonds. We take a look at that about every 5 years. This limits our schedule, timing of our projects, and then the responsiveness of that. Those capital projects that are identified either too small for a bond referendum or too big to put in our operations and maintenance budget due to funding falls through the cracks and gets left out. Our stormwater utility fee would be able to be a dedicated funding mechanism to support the needed maintenance and begin funding of these needed drainage projects. Some of these challenges, just to recapitalize to talk about, is that currently we have identified 322 miles of enclosed pipeline, 145 miles of roadside ditch, over 12,000 inlets, and then 435 acres of detention. We cannot continually adequately maintain our system or implement new localized projects while being solely dependent on the general fund. The use of the utility fee for operations and maintenance would greatly aid our efforts to complete projects timely as well and continue in our operations and maintenance needs. Our city's grown and it continues to grow, and additionally infrastructure is continually added to our system to be maintained through new subdivisions being built or commercial developments that are discharging into our infrastructure. Over the course of the last 20 years, we've had 31 new subdivisions that have been built, which have increased our infrastructure maintenance beyond our staff level ability to maintain those, and so we become a reactive mode program. We respond then to those issues that immediately are identified or brought forth. We currently have the same 6 positions for the last 20 years, even though we've added tens of thousands of linear footage of pipe, roadside ditches to maintain, and hundreds of acres of ponds that we have built over the years. I'd like to recapitalize a little bit. During Hurricane Harvey, I know it's been talked about a lot, engineering staff identified several local projects based off of what we saw during that flooding. We've completed limited analysis on some of these, but due to funding limitations, most of the smaller projects are not able to be addressed. Staff has also identified projects that are too large for existing staff levels to be able to do. Projects include items such as just roadside maintenance, culvert replacement, meaning culverts have moved, changed, restricted the flow of drainage underneath driveways, or enclosed pipe maintenance such as inside a subdivision that has gone completely underground. We need to maintain those, clean those out, inspect those, make sure that we have no blockages. Without added maintenance activities, infrastructure is continually going to have reduced capacity. We'll specifically rely on a reactive mode upon work orders and not be able to go towards a proactive city-wide maintenance approach. The general fund is limited. It's highly competitive, as we all know about, as we talk about every year. Zero funds for small capital projects, and there are many other competing priorities besides streets and public safety. Due to the fiscal year this year constraints, there's no additional funding for opportunities for small drainage projects. So to recapitalize a little bit on our ballot language that was passed by Resolution 2021-121, it was passed on June 14th. It was set at a $5 per month for all residential properties and $1.79 for every 1,000 square feet of non-residential properties. One item that was added was drainage utility charge was not going to be amended more often than once during a 3-year period. Looking to submit this to the voters on May 7th in 2022. In the August 18th memo that we provided to council, we provided a couple pro formas, the $5 per month for all residential properties, along with items associated with certificates of obligation versus revenue bonds, and also $7.50 per month for all residential properties, also providing financial information regarding the certificates of obligation versus revenue bonds. Our expenditure would be taking a look at cash funding, would be limited to small capital projects, at those at $500,000 or under and less, and we'd still be looking at debt funding for larger projects. The maintenance, the stormwater utility fee would be able to provide us the ability to develop a programmatic approach and begin overdue maintenance work with dedicated funding is perhaps the largest benefit of this fee, thus allowing for maintenance items and small capital projects to be addressed and not deferred or be reactive until a problem occurs, or need to wait until we create a larger capital project and then fund it through the capital improvement program. So with that, I'd like to go briefly over the submitted pro forma for a $5 fee. As you can tell, taking a look as if voters pass and approve this program at the May election, looking at starting in the fourth quarter of 2022, collecting a quarter's worth of fees. Taking a look at funding about 19% of the operations and maintenance, and the remainder of that year would be 81% going towards capital projects. Moving forward, we'll be running around a 50-50 split between operations and maintenance and being able to cash fund projects. Looking at 2024 and 2025, depending on the $5 fee or the $7.50 fee, ability to issuance debt associated with debt funding of certificates of obligation. This raising about $17.5 million in the $5 fee, or a total of $7 at the $7.50, approximately $50 million between the 2 years. Highlighting here, taking a look at the current 5-year CIP, utilizing the $5 pro forma, is the first 3 projects highlighted in light yellow. Those are projects that are currently in our capital improvement program, funding those instead of the certificates, current existing certificates of obligation, but handing those over into the stormwater utility fee funding mechanism. The green projects are ones that we've identified through our Harvey After Action report, and then also continuing through looking at future projects to improve areas. This would then fund out and finish out the $17.5 million able to fund through the $5 fee. Staff was also tasked to take a look at shifting more of the funding obligation to a capital improvement side, funding projects with only about 35 to 40% of the operations maintenance being funded with this program, therefore still remaining a majority of the current operations maintenance in the general fund. This provides still probably about $900 to $1 million a year needing to be funded out of the general fund. It does increase our funding opportunities with bond proceeds in the $5 fee at $31 million in 2024. Taking a look in 2025, if you follow the $7.50 fee, you're projecting about $72 million. So with that, bond sales for the stormwater utility fee would be conducted as certificates of obligation. Revenue bonds require the same bond covenants that we currently have with the enterprise fund, cash reserves, bond coverage, thereby reducing bonding capacity from $17.5 million under the certificates of obligation versus $13.28 million in bond proceeds if you follow the enterprise fund. funding mechanism of revenue bonds. So our next steps that we have is that should the measure be approved by the voters in May, would be the adoption of the ordinance creating the municipal drainage utility district, adoption of an ordinance to levy fees, and then staff would work during that time to finish the development of our stormwater utility business plan and policy. Should the ballot not be approved, maintenance will continue as currently conducted. Maintenance activities will still be underfunded and not addressed due to limited staffing levels. Again, just to reiterate, we still have same staffing levels that we've had for several decades, along with the same budgeting funding obligations that have remained the same over the years. Our system is still growing. The level of service, unfortunately, will just continue to reduce due to staff capacity, and then we'll continue to be in a reactive state of mind. Areas that would be impacted is the maintenance of our system is also tied to several permits, our MS4 permit and our community rating system. Both of these require annual reporting of the activities that we do per those goals that were set forth in those permits. Currently, our community rating system is rated at a 6. Those provide insurance benefits to those that live in the floodplain areas. They have a reduced percentage off of their premiums. As if we start to raise or lower that rating to a 7, 8, or 9, those percentages decrease. And those are rated to the number of points that we get and maintain it on an annual basis or are re-rated on a 5-year basis, tied to the activities that we do and the way we can be able to meet those requirements. So with that, as we focused, is that on the ballot language is no more than once every 3 years. Recommendation to fully fund the operation maintenance with the fee. Use the balance of cash funding for smaller capital projects and bond funding, those between $500,000 and $10 million. Any longer long range projects that are beyond that would be taking a look at the bond program, the traditional capital improvement program, funded with those general obligation voter bonds. So at this time, Mr. Pearson, that's completed my presentation. I'd like to turn that back over to you now, sir.
Thank you again. And council's seen much of this material on prior, and if you wanted to add some of the discussion additionally that's been brought up in the past, that's on slide 25 around the topics we've heard in the past. And then if you want to talk about any of the pro forma information, 22 is the one that we put out more recently with that heavier emphasis on projects, and then 21 is the projects themselves if you wanted to ask questions about the specifics, but we will stand by for questions. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, staff, for a good presentation. It was a good refresher. And just by way of, housekeeping, we do have a 6:30 meeting to start on time. We do have a chance to grab a sandwich before. We allocated an hour for this, so let's try to make sure that we stay within that. And no one taken to task on that. What I would like to say for the council, because we do have ballot language, we've already voted for this to go to the voters in May with ballot language already there. And I'm assuming staff and legal department would like to have clear direction on, do we want to keep the ballot language as is? Do we want to change the ballot language? Or do you want more direction on the program itself? Because one of those gets into a lot more detail, the other one doesn't.
So thanks for framing that. More so, we should come out based on prior council conversations on the ballot language, and if you want any other parameters on that, because it has been brought up, but as you said, council did put that resolution together and move that forward. So that'd be first and foremost we need to come out of. And frankly, some of the other details about the program, they go together a bit, but we can develop those further as we go along.
Yeah, because I think the page that's up now, that's on everybody's, is kind of a good working piece. That do we want the ballot language to stay as is, or do we want to change it, and those types of things. So just keeping that in mind, if you would like to see some changes And then, and again, we're not voting on anything tonight, so I think staff is simply looking for some good feedback. Darren, help me. We won't put this on, we won't actually call for the election until early February. Is that correct?
That is correct. I think there's a deadline in February, correct?
There is.
Okay. And so, I mean,
We would
clearly,
normally-
we don't have to decide ballot language fully tonight. We'll have time to do that. I want to make sure that you guys have time to craft whatever that language is going to be, you know, with enough time to get that out and to us and to decide. So with that, I'm just going to open up to council with those. Just let's maybe try to keep to how our comments are going to be. Which way we want to start? Woody, go ahead.
As long as I beat Perez at the table. Yeah. Well, you know, in the beginning, and I did ask, you know, and we voted on it and sending it out for the people. This body up here is not, you know, in a position to, I don't think so, come in and a different tax or a different fee or whatever. So this is the reason I say that and look at it. There's some language in there, I think, that needs clarification to make sure when it goes out that people are aware that it's going to vote on it. And one of them says in there, and this is about how often that comes in the budget, said, explain the, asking for explanation, subject to amend no more often than once every 3 years. You know, if that could be very clear, you know, of saying, you know, that, I think that needs to come out. And I think also we would do this just like any other bond issue and put the projects that there, you know, that's going to be issued in the first part of it. I mean, there's a ton of projects that are there, and but I know that there have been some saying that, you know, put a sunset on this thing. Once you get into it and you start, you know, selling bonds to pay for these capital projects and stuff, there's really no way to put a sunset on it. We're going to continue to pay for it for years down the road to do that. And I think that's, you know, the whole point behind it, that there are a ton of projects out there that we need to do. So whatever, you know, we do on this, we need to move forward with it, I'm sure, but have it in a way which is very transparent when the people come in to vote for it, that you understand it fully, you know, of what you're doing. And I think, you know, and the backside of it is if we could list maybe some of the projects that would come out of the chute first, so people would know within their particular area. And in the long term, if we'd have discussions of doing some of these projects and speaking about, okay, this would you know, affect and reduce flooding in certain areas, so hopefully reduce the flooding. You know, you get a Harvey and none of this is going to make much difference at all when you're talking about 43 inches of rain. But so the main thing for me is, you know, is that it's very transparent on what the people are going to be voting for. And between now and May, we have a lot of time to put that together, the staff does, or whatever, and maybe have some meetings out in the community on there to talk about these and which projects are going out the first go around through there. One other thing I did want to ask the people in Public Works that are currently doing some of this work and the equipment there, will that be transferred into utility, storm sewer utility division or whatever on there? Because I know that part of it, when we talked about it in the beginning, I guess it was about 6 employees that need to be hired, another engineer to be hired, equipment to be brought in, and for $5 a month, you're not going to get much. You know, once you do that, there won't be nothing left to do the job. But I was wondering in Public Works where we're doing that work now, would any of those people and equipment be used to start this off?
So yes, sir, they are planned. If you look at the $5 pro forma that's put together there, it covers all of our existing operating costs plus some projected future operating cost. Some of them are the mandates from some of the stormwater plans and the permits that we have to have from the state. So all the operating costs are in that, and then we still show the available capacity to do projects above and beyond that with that amount of fee. So it does show all the operating cost, future proposed operating cost, and then what we can do for projects even after those are moved into the fund.
Yeah, so the big thing for me is just be very transparent, for the people, and maybe have some meetings, because Lord knows there's enough projects in here that we really need to do that, but understandingly that the people that's going to vote on it, they fully understand what's going to be done and how it's going to be handled.
Member Owens, if I could just clarify, the 6 people are existing people. The pro forma calls out for the material that we provided for 1 additional engineer. I don't know about any other maintenance staff, but I think there's contract. There's 6 existing that would be covered. Is that correct?
Council, Mayor, Mr. Pearson, yes, there are existing staff that would transfer over. We have, as you stated, that is correct, looking at adding staff and contracts.
I just didn't want that to, we're not talking about 6 new people.
Yeah, because, with what we're doing so far on this, to put it out, and you hire 6 people and you go out to trucks, equipment, heavy equipment, that's
We're not hiring 6 people,
okay. But,
right?
Correct. We're transferring those existing staff members over.
all right, that's good. Thank you. Appreciate it, Mayor. Yours.
Okay. Member Frez?
Thank you, Mayor. I think maybe to get out ahead of an argument that I know will be coming, and just so we're clear, we're not debating whether this is going onto the ballot. We've already voted for that. We're just trying to structure the ballot language. One of the things I've talked with staff about is I agree with Member Carbone, who I know is in opposition to this, but in the basic tenet of what he is saying, which is this a tax or a fee? And it's hard to differentiate those two things when you're talking about revenue coming into the city and how it's generated. I mean, there's clear differences from a legal standpoint, but practically, what is this fee doing? And where I think that we owe it to the citizens to differentiate it from a tax, as I would define it, and from a fee, as I would define it, is we don't want to implement this and start pulling money directly off of the general fund, reducing that burden that already exists, specifically because all that does is give us a little bit more leg room in the general fund, and we may end up creeping that back up with tax increases, saying, hey, look, we've moved these 6 individuals over into the storm sewer fee, so now without having to go with a 3% ballot, we have room to add 6 more people in another department. I think that would be disingenuous to what I would hope to do with the fee. I would like us to keep salaries and existing equipment costs off of the fee and let it focus solely on projects or initiatives that are necessary by the state that are in the storm sewer category. And, for instance, construction project, maintenance projects, or regional detention plans, I'd like us to be able to utilize this to try and tackle our CRS program, possibly do some of the programs that would allow us to reduce our CRS rating. If we go from a 6 to a 5, instead of 20% discount on our flood insurance, we can get 25. If we can get to 4, if we have funding in there to possibly attack that, then we could go to a 30% discount for flood insurance, to where there's possibly, at least for those people who would be most directly affected by this, there could be a balance of the flood insurance. I would like us to do that. I really don't want to see this just alleviate pressure off of the general fund. I know that may be frustrating to staff, because there would be a great benefit to staff and our ability to budget in every year, but I do think that at least as I programmed when I initiated this, and I'll take full credit for it or blame, but when I initiated this several years ago, that's what I intended it for, and I want us to keep to that. I would like us to consider modifying the ballot language so we're communicating to our citizens that this is not a tax by another name. This is not a way for us to just get us some legroom in the property tax rate so that we can backfill it with something else, and not people see that we're actually doing a shell game. I don't think that would be the intent of staff, and I know that that's probably, from their perspective, the best implementation, the best use of these funds. But if we can focus truly on projects, truly on maintenance, truly on programs that could possibly find savings for the other citizens, then it's easier for me to go to the citizens and say, this is truly a fee, and it's a protected fee in an enterprise fund where it only goes to projects. It only goes to things that directly provide you relief in potentially flooding or prevent flooding for your property. I think that is more fair to the citizens, and I think that's more what I would like to see the ballot language modify towards. That's all I have, Mayor.
Mayor, if I could ask a clarifying question. So what I heard from you, Member Perez, is more along the lines of slide 22, but just curious, when you say projects, is that limited to capital projects? Because in the presentation, you heard a great deal about the maintenance gap and what we do. I mean, enhanced maintenance that's not being done. I'm curious if that falls into that category.
I mean, I personally would. I think that's probably it's a broader conversation of what we would say it does not qualify. I wouldn't be arrogant enough to say only my opinion would matter, but I do think, from my opinion, ditch maintenance is part of what we can do here. If we have neighborhoods that have significant flooding over time, and it's a conveyance issue or a culvert issue or something of that nature, we can use these fees to more quickly react to that. We can also use these fees as we do these projects, and we may have a contractor that leaves a messy work site or doesn't repair things as quickly. We can go in and use these funds to quickly make a repair and then go after the contractor later, as opposed to try and deal with the in-between. I know there's some, not to drag this conversation in, but there's been some complaints with people where we've done some roadway maintenance projects or ditch maintenance projects, and some of the culvert replacement wasn't as clean as we would like it to be. So I think, I mean, I don't know if I could define it as this, but I'd say shallow ditch maintenance and above.
So kind of to, I guess, further get to the point of, I guess, that distinction is that, like, our existing 6 people and the equipment they use, that is ditch cleaning, that is culvert maintenance, that is the things that keep the system at its full capacity, or keep it so that we don't lose capacity in the system. So I don't see a distinction between that not going into this fund versus staying in the general fund.
So I would define it as material costs if we're doing it in-house. So if we can fund the staff and we can fund the equipment through the general fund, but we go out and we got to buy new material, or we're closing in a ditch and then for maintenance, from my perspective, the material costs could be funded by this, but the staff still needs to be paid off of the general fund. That would be my opinion. I think I don't argue with the sentiment that you have, and I think that it's a fair argument. But I believe that if we don't come up with a stern boundary of salaries and equipment cannot be paid for this fee, then those employees for which are doing maintenance, those salaries and equipment, well, what about the engineering staff? Will they participate in it? Can we pull some of their fees, maybe half of their salary to this fee? Maybe some administrators, and maybe we can be creative about that. Not saying that current staff would do that, but in the future, some of that creative thinking may alleviate other pressure somewhere else. And if it's not clearly defined as we can't do that, then that I think maybe becomes disingenuous to what, as at least I intend for this fee to be used. So I would like to be more strict about salaries and equipment not being paid for it, so there's never, or not being paid by the fee, so there's never a misunderstanding that salaries and equipment can ever be paid for this fee.
And Mayor, thanks for the indulgence. It's a workshop, so I think that recognizes it's only 1 of 7, but it helps to get some ideas going forward. So
Yeah, I think a good clarification, no problem. Member Little.
Mayor, are any of the surrounding communities imposing a similar type of utility drainage fee?
Councilman Little, yes. Webster has a fee. Also, Baytown has a fee. If you've all, there's a recent article out, Baytown has a $3 per month fee, and then they just raised it to $4. They use their $3. I happened to meet with Mr. Frank from Baytown, the Public Works Director, and their $3 fee is solely used for operations and maintenance. They fund everything out of that $3 fee. The only reason why that they have raised it $1 this year is because of the partnership with Harris County Flood Control and selling debt to pay for those partnership projects. That's the only reason that that one additional dollar is being raised in Baytown.
And
I'm sorry, what?
do you guys think
Oh, across the state, I could say there's probably about at least 40 minimum. McAllen was new last year. Louisville was new. We recently updated a report that we'll be happy to provide out that shows in the 2013 survey of the old memos that I provided to you all in the past, there was a chart, a bar chart that showed the number of cities throughout the state of Texas. We've revisited, and they've all, pretty much a majority of them have increased their fees since 2013. Lubbock being the highest at $16.
what do you guys think about including some language in the ballot that says similar fees are charged to Baytown?
I'm sorry.
Including something in the ballot language that, to the effect that similar fees are charged in the surrounding cities, so that the citizens don't think that this is just something Maryland's invented to collect additional revenue. Might be a good selling point.
Onto our
Okay.
attorney.
Yeah, I was want to make sure you weren't going to try to respond to that, but yeah, no, that's something that I don't think we could do because it would be sort of considered at that point, possibly considered an arbitrary fee if we just chose a fee to be similar to some other city. Because that fee's going, since you're establishing a utility, you're going to have it's going to be based upon ultimately your projects, and you have to have a business plan developed. And so essentially, I mean, the council can adopt a fee of whatever it wants. It's just you're going to have to develop your pro forma business plan based upon the amount of revenue that you generate from it. But I wouldn't recommend just choosing a city and going with a fee similar to theirs.
That's why I asked how you feel about it. Will this be added to the water bill?
Councilman Little, that would be the intent, would be collected.
Okay. And it's going to be on the May 7th ballot. At what point in time will the language be available to the public?
So my understanding is if you don't do anything, it'll be as already adopted the resolution. You have to call for it, but that's what the point is. If we want to, if council chooses to moderate that at all, we need to start hearing about that. But if nothing, correct me if I'm wrong, Darren, if you don't do anything, this is the language, we have to call for the vote, but this is the language that was adopted previously.
Okay, so Derek, could we send out something in the water bill, say a month before the vote, explaining what's going to be on the ballot?
It can be strictly informational. Once the council calls an election, we can produce information strictly, but strictly informational, but not supporting or opposing the proposed ballot.
Okay.
The city can't campaign for it, is what you're saying.
Correct.
All right. As far as the language itself, might help clarify if this is more language in there that says this is a new drainage charge and there's no existing ones. Maybe I would say that probably half the population out there doesn't know what impervious means. Might want to use a different word or explain it. Is there any other impervious material other than concrete that we have in the city?
I mean, basically any paved area or any building is considered impervious.
Okay. And then maybe like Councilman Owens said, maybe clarify the last half a sentence in there talking about the charge not being subject to change for at least 3 years. Maybe say it won't be increased. We know it will never go down. So that's all I have, Mayor.
Good deal. Member Camcar.
Thank you, Mayor. Can we pull up slide 8 really quickly? I just want to run through a couple of things, and I'll pass it off to our members over here to my right. The language you use is really important, Chief Engineer. Are you telling me we don't do more, we can't maintain what we have? We're just on a downward slope right now if we don't find more resources? Is that essentially what I'm supposed to get out of that?
Councilman Kamkar, yes, we are in a reactive mode.
All right, and so, okay. Can we go to the next page? Slide 9. What is the bigger the problems? Are the drainage costs just running away from us, or is it just, there's so many things there, but what is like the concern that bothers you the most when we need to start getting our hands on?
Well, you have several things. You have operations and maintenance of the existing infrastructure that we have, but then in drainage projects that we're seeing right now in the bidding world right now is that costs are continually going up. And also in working with Harris County Flood Control, for example, bridges were built at a certain level. New studies have come out, and bridges need to be elevated or moved and replaced. So, or existing infrastructure such as water or sewer infrastructure that goes across creeks have to be raised. All those play into those continual projects that are continually cost.
And on that first bullet, the LMI thing and the benefit to cost, what does that mean in English? Like, are we becoming less competitive because of, I mean, what's?
I know Mr. Hardy has expressed many times during grant funding and grant opportunities, these are items that they use in cost to benefit. It has to be a greater than a 1.0 when we take a look at project to value of property, value of work. If it is less than that, then it doesn't qualify. The other one is low to moderate income. We have a small area in the city that is meets that criteria that Mr. Hardy has worked diligently to maintain, but that's where that low to moderate income area is in that part of our city. I mean, that's the only area that we have that would qualify for those. That's why we went after the Hickory Slough grant funding through the GLO to try and do that. That area was in the LMI identified area.
Let me ask you a question. If we have areas that are not low to moderate income, we are going to struggle to pull down federal dollars or state dollars. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yes, sir.
We're kind of on our own then in some of these areas that have higher adjusted gross incomes, higher home values, higher assessed values. Those are guys, it's kind of our money or no money, right?
Yes, sir. That is correct. And I always kind of defer back to Mr. Hardy too. He has some creative ways, but yes, those are the challenges we hit.
Understood. I'm going to buzz through here real quick. Page 21, slide 21. One more. Or is that it? Okay, it's not on this little thing in color. So a couple of these projects, because we have like 4 buckets, right? Like your real big projects, kind of like your mid-size, and then your smaller projects, maybe neighborhood level projects. I just want to highlight, we've got a couple of the Pine Hollow drainage improvements. And then we have some people here that live in Pine Hollow. Tranquility Lakes, veterans drainage along Walnut to Mary's Creek, Longwood Estates, Twin Woods. These are where people live. These are going to vastly improve some of these areas, whether it be capacity or flow. And these are, people will see the result of this.
Yes, sir. These are underperforming areas identified in Hurricane Harvey and also in drainage studies.
And right now, we don't have the dollars allocated necessarily to these items, not all of them.
Yes, sir. So the first 3 are identified actually in the capital improvement program. The ones below those 3 in green or a light green color are, what do we say, below the line or unfunded at this time.
Okay. So Pine Hollow, Tranquility Lakes, veterans drainage, Hickory Slough, Longwood, and Twin, that'll be kind of whenever we get there. We're not there yet. They're not in the appropriation pipeline. They don't have a funding source.
They do not have a funding source at this time. They would be proposed in the next general obligation funded voter bonds.
All right, last slide that we were on that the mayor referred to, slide 25. The guidance I would give, I lean to Member Perez's points. I do want this to be more capital projects intensive. The percentage I would go to is somewhere in the 70 to 80% mode. Right now we're not there. To improve the language, I would actually go further than what is in the ballot language today, which is not to improve or amend less than every 5 years and twice within a decade. I think we need to create some stability in our budgeting, but I think we also need to create stability for the businesses, for mom and dad, for business owners, that the fee will stay relatively level. I think once every 5 years or every 60 months is probably reasonable. You can put that in your budget. You can work around that. Once every 3 years, starts moving. I would like to work with our friends at BD4 to find more areas where we can do shared projects, as well as what can we do on an interlocal basis to provide more funding capacity. I know that they've consistently told us they're a maintenance organization, and I applaud that. But these problems aren't taking care of themselves, as Mr. Upton alluded to, and we need to do more projects. The only other thing I would add is I would like to see if we can index this amount so that the moms and dads don't think this is arbitrary. I would like us to find a construction index so that way it can be very clear what are we moving the $5 to 5 or 6 years down the line. CPI is probably not a clean indicator of where construction materials are going. So I think that would make this thing more durable, as well as you can go calculate what that would be. So not to be more than index whatever for construction materials over the 5-year period or 10-year period, I think would make that more durable. Those are my comments, Mayor.
Member Carbone?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess if you go to slide 22, just so I'm looking at this, so the first full year in 2023 looks like we'll raise 5.2 million. Am I reading that correctly?
Currently, that's what is proposed based on some early looking at items. We're continuing to do proof of concept with our mechanism to isolate, find out all the impervious cover.
Okay.
But that's estimated right now.
Okay. And I mentioned this back in the budget. We sat up here and patted ourselves on the back because we saved $750,000 in the general fund, and now we're pushing a new tax fee, whatever you want to call it, out. That's going to raise 5.2 million and grow. I noted earlier when you're asked about neighboring cities, there didn't sound like too many that were neighboring, but maybe in the general area, everybody's going up on their fees. So just something to note that we're starting there and going up. Following up on Member Perez and Camcar talking about capital projects, I've always been a fan of putting together a bond, send that to the residents. The size and scope can be up to staff and council, but I think that accomplishes the same thing. We're starting to kind of split hairs when we talk about what can go to O&M or maintenance and what gets pulled out of the general fund. But bottom line is it's clear this is going to be a windfall at some level to the general fund. And shocking, I don't see taxes going down. So I struggle with that. And then I struggle, you look in the audience, there's business owners here that have built multi-million-dollar construction projects recently that have had to pay for their drainage and design it to our criteria. And my understanding is our criteria is held up pretty good. And correct me if I'm wrong, but all the newer parts of the city that developed under the new EDCM, UDC, whatever acronym you want to use, survived pretty well. So, you've got Kelsey, HCA, Memorial Hermann, and you look at their impervious cover and the fees they're going to be paying, but they just dropped how many millions of value on the ground that they're paying tax on. They built to our code that worked. So I struggle with that, but there was a resolution passed. In terms of, is there any way to put a provision about over 65? 'Cause my concern is a lot of our senior citizens on fixed income right now have some relief on property tax due to the over 65 exemption, and I don't see any language in here that excludes them. Is there any way to do that if this does move forward?
I don't know the answer to that right now. I'd have to look that up.
Member Carbone, if I could, I think the over 65 is, in my opinion, it's always been political gamesmanship. Some of the richest people I know were over 65, and they don't have to pay certain taxes because of their age. If what we're trying to do is people who are actually on fixed income, then maybe we could put a lower cap, a floor on if your house is valued at less than this, then you're exempt from the fee.
I'd be interested in something because some over 65 are well off, but some aren't.
Yeah, but most of the poorest people I know are in their 20s. And if we want to really protect the people who it may have the lack of capability of paying and contributing this fee, let's attack it more directly than through kind of some ancillary measure. Would be my suggestion.
Yeah, and then in terms of ballot language, I would like to see some sort of sunset provision. If this is going to be such a great project, then let's not be scared to put it back out to the voters 3-5 years from now. And as Councilman Hill or Judge Hill always said, there's never a better time to stop a bad decision. So I'm still not a fan of this. I think we can accomplish the same thing with the bond package. So I guess if council was inclined, is there a drop dead date, or I guess what's the calendar look like in terms of getting this on the ballot or not?
February the 18th is the deadline for us to call the election.
Okay. So the ballot language and or removing it from the ballot can be changed up until that date?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Member Orlando?
Thank you. I just have a couple of comments on the discussion that just took place related to lower income folks. Agree that if we want to see some modeling around that would look like, I would be inclined to support something that more directly addressed the needs of low income people versus just an age cutoff. So I think that's certainly something to look at and a fair concern, but I appreciate the more direct approach. We were just talking about this being a windfall for the general fund. I think there is a very fair criticism that money is fungible, and that if you were just going to have this fee cover our existing drainage obligations, or not even obligations, because we have more obligations than we're able to pay for, obviously. But if we're just going to use this fee to pay for what's already happening, I think the criticism that this is some kind of shell game would be a fair one. And that would not be something that I would be supportive of. I think the intentions and what has been discussed up here previously is that this is supposed to be for incremental projects, incremental maintenance that make an incremental difference in filling the gap towards our huge outstanding drainage needs. We haven't done that. We haven't done that through bond programs in the past, and we know that these are going to continue to happen, and we can keep passing the bonds. But if we want to be intellectually honest about it, as we're building out this new drainage capacity, we have to pay for the maintenance of that into the future. So we're going to keep on building these things. So I guess I'm saying that in reference to a sunset provision. Once we put these projects out there, those are now something that have to be taken care of in perpetuity, essentially. So I think it's being intellectually honest with people about what their choices are, that, hey, we're going to build this drainage infrastructure that's going to make a positive impact for the city. And we're going to pay for it up front, but this is something we've been talking about a lot, fortunately, with everything else. Every street we lay down, every sidewalk we lay down, we pay a cost for it up front, but then we have to pay for that. We have to recapitalize that over its entire life. And then at the end, so it's an ongoing thing. And so I think the way this is structured makes sense based on the reality of what it means to fund these types of projects, and is the most sustainable thing. Certainly would be comfortable also, interested in Member Kamkar's discussion about limiting this to twice a decade. Fine with doing that. I think limiting the number of times this can go up and also being very clear that this is going to be incremental projects, though, is what's in the best interest and would be the best proposal for people to be able to consider, the most honest one. So that's my feedback, if that's helpful for staff. But yeah, certainly, I guess my big underlying emphasis, I want this to add as much incremental spending on drainage as possible versus simply relieving general fund pressure, which is not really the use of this that I can support. So, appreciate it.
All right. The only questions I've got, a couple here. As the ballot language is right now, Mr. Coker, and go back to the last slide that you were there. Right there. So if the ballot language is no more than once every 3 years, as of now, let's say we set the fee at $5. is there any provision in the ballot language that limits that $5 fee and where it goes up in 3 years? In other words, can it go to 6? Can it go to 10? Can it go to 50?
Well,
I'm using extreme numbers there. I don't assume
The
that's what
current
we do.
language, there's nothing that would limit that. And I think that's Councilmember Camcar and some other council members mentioned the reference to tying it to an index. So it currently is not tied to any limitation.
Right. And obviously, we've talked about an increase, some type of a percentage increase is some kind of a ceiling. Currently, the current ballot language, this could grow to any particular number that's out there with no ceiling. It could grow to 30, it could grow to 50, it could grow to wherever if it didn't have a ceiling on it. Not saying it's going to do that overnight. Obviously, things cost more 20 years from now than they cost today. But currently, there's no, that's when you say ceiling and you're asking for a ceiling or consideration of a ceiling, that's what you're talking about.
Correct. And there's currently not a ceiling then.
And then if you would, go to slide 21, I think it was. And just so you'll know, I mean, if it's going to pass and it goes every, I think I like 5 years better than 3. I certainly like some type of cost index. I think that cost index ought to have not just materials, but labor as well, because we are using this fee for labor, not just materials. So if you're going to have an index, you might as well index it with the full amount, not a portion of it. On here, all of these projects, with the exception, well, not the detention pump. You take that one out, and you take Pine Hollow out. Pine Hollow drainage improvements, I'd like somebody maybe to, we don't have to do this tonight, I can ask about it offline. But if I understand, most of the drainage improvements that are needed there are as a result of either one, bad criteria, or number two, a developer that just didn't do it the right way, which has ultimately caused some localized flooding within Pine Hollow, if I understand that correct. Like the whole subdivision of Pine Hollow does not flood. We're talking about a cul-de-sac or a portion of the neighborhood that's had some problems. Is that correct?
That's correct. There's also, yes, that's correct. In the simplified answer, yes.
Okay. And so, and I know there's been court cases. I know there's been all kinds of stuff around that case over years. The people who live in the subdivision, they just want it fixed and we need to move on. And I get it and understand that. But other than that, everything else that's on here as far as Twin Creek Woods, Longwood, and these particular areas were built clearly before 1994.
That is correct, Mayor.
Okay. So again, to the point, some of our current drainage criteria has worked. So the argument here that what we're talking about is truly additional money into the system. It's not taking money out of the general fund or lowering the general fund. It is adding to the overall cost of the city, from what I heard in the discussion that's here tonight. And again, ultimately, I think this should be something that the voters approve or not approve. The way the state law is written around this, the council itself can approve this, can just, the way the law is written is the council can approve this fee. But the council has chosen to take it to the voters, which if instead of just doing this, across the council table, I think going to the voters is the right thing to do. So I just want to highlight, I mean, this currently, until we decide as a council to change the ballot language, there is no set how much it can go up. Right now, it's every 3 years. So until the council votes 5 years, until the council votes, it has to be tied to some index. That number can be anything, any council wants it to be, 5 years later or 3 years later, depending on if it's 3 or 5 years. And then lastly, this fee could grow to any number that you can imagine out there unless it has a ceiling to it. So my comments to the members of the public out there that if you want to see changes to this, we need to hear from you. If we don't hear from you, then chances are this may be your ballot language. So, because I didn't hear a consensus to change the ballot language throughout. So this is going to be something that staff's going to have to, I guess, grapple with a little bit. Do we just keep it the same, or do we propose some ballot language? So amendments. But at the end of the day, I do like if you're in a lower value home, that may help limit some of your exposure to this. Currently, a $200,000 home, a $5 fee, if you want to call it a tax, raises your overall tax to the city 4.27%. If it's a $7.50 fee, you go up 6.41%. If you're in a $300,000 home, that same $5 is $2.85% increase. If it's a $750 fee, it's 4.27%. So clearly, the lower the value of the home, the less impact it would be the more impact it would be if it's a straight across the board fee. So that may be some good pro forma measure, some hybrid that staff would like to look into for council to consider. So with that, does anybody else have any additional comments or concerns?
Mayor, in the interest of time, I know we're pushed up against it, but it doesn't look like we would be able to have the time to discuss what we could all agree upon and give that to staff. But we all proposed some initiatives. Perhaps we could have a follow-up meeting with some of these initiatives actionable on a given night, rather than the secondary workshop, and then we can make the modifications that were suggested, either all or in part, so that there is some productivity.
Yeah, good suggestions. This was a good, I guess, second draft, if you will, around this discussion since June. So all good suggestions. And I think sooner rather than later, I don't think we need to wait until February to have that discussion. I think it needs to be somewhat sooner so we can really give staff time to develop what we need to and what we want to see. Okay. All right, with that, I'm going to adjourn this special meeting at 6:07.